Mark Salamango here once again. Here is your Week 11 recap. This is going to be a long one, so get comfy. Week 11 was a good week. I'm becoming more and more addicted to the sport. As usual, something piqued my interest. I love the biohacking movement. I like thinking about how to improve. I want to get as good at whatever I'm doing as quickly as possible. Often techniques used to improve in one sport, hobby, or whatever may not have made their way into whatever you're trying to learn. When I ask other jiu-jitsu folks about how to best learn jiu-jitsu, I hear the same thing over and over. They say, you just have to roll. You just have to do it. It's going to take a long time. I agree that those are important considerations, but what if there were little tweaks that your instructor could make and that you could make that would increase the speed at which you improve? I refuse to believe that we are doing 100% perfectly in every school to ensure that students get the most out of each session. I thought it might be interesting to look at a few activities that require movements and break apart the wisdom about learning/memorizing them. I was trying to think about how I remember some of the movements we're learning. Not even the application of them, just the movements, and it made me think about dancing. My youngest daughter has been doing dance since she was little, and it has been fascinating to go to her recitals and see how much those little dancers have to retain. How did they do so much in so little time? So today, we will investigate some methods dance instructors have been using and a bit of the science behind them. I'll leverage some personal experience along with web research and academic publications to hopefully paint a picture of some techniques dance instructors use that may be helpful in teaching and learning jiu-jitsu. Dancers need to think not only about how to retrieve moves from their brain when they have learned them, but also how to encode them into their memory as they're learning them. I know this seems a little odd, but if you really think about it, it's important to develop a system to get the sequence of moves into your brain. When I was in middle school, I remember forgetting about a geography test. I think it was on the provinces of Canada. I literally had 5 minutes to study. It was one of those multiple choice deals, and so immediately I came up with a mnemonic using the first letters of the provinces. I don't remember the mnemonic now. I'm sure it was absurd, but I know I aced the test. A common one used now for the Canadian provinces is Billy and Sally made our queen nervous playing near needles. The first letter of each word represents British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. Now, mnemonics are one way to encode and memorize information. So now that we're talking about memory, it's important to know a little bit about memory. There are really two different types of memory, explicit and implicit. Explicit memory deals with things like storing facts, like the date the Magna Carta was signed, events like your wife's birthday, your anniversary, or when you have to renew your license. People, like who your kindergarten teacher was, Mrs. Trentacosta. Places and objects. It's the typical stuff you think of when you think about memorizing stuff. Implicit memory is where you store things like how to hit a baseball, swing a golf club, ride a bike, or drive a car. For dance and jiu-jitsu for that matter, it's good to have a balance of both implicit and explicit memory. I won't go deep into the biology here, but at a high level, as you learn something, neural pathways are created in your brain. When you need to retrieve those things you learned, you reactivate the pathways and you strengthen the connections, making it easier to recall the next time. When you do that stabilization and restabilization, you actually change the cellular architecture over time, integrating the memory more solidly into your body. So what are some general methods we can use to encode memories? Dance instructors will often use a well-rounded teaching approach, including verbal cues, mental imagery or visualization, and kinesthetic experiences. Before we dive into why it's important to leverage a well-rounded approach, consider this. According to the paper, The Art and Science of Teaching/Learning Dance by Joan Walton, she says, This rapidity of learning is especially important for beginning students, as early success makes the uncomfortable period of looking awkward much shorter, and students who feel confident about their dancing stay with dance for longer periods of time. There is a necessary period of looking and feeling awkward that can be a strong negative reinforcer if allowed to continue unabated for months, especially for teen and adult learners. So feelings of success and feeling like they look good need to occur soon. The discouragement that follows continual lack of success in this area of looking good can cause people to drop out and never come back. So the theory of multiple intelligences speeds learning and is a boon to self-esteem, a crucial factor in retention in dance class. At the end, Joan mentions the theory of multiple intelligences. Let's just simplify that to say that different people learn in different ways. So learning to teach to the mode that the student receives best helps them learn faster. As a white belt myself, I can tell you that I often feel awkward. I feel stupid because some of the movements are so foreign. If I'm shown something almost willy-nilly, then I almost always instantly forget it. However, if I am taught in a way that resonates with me, I'm usually encouraged because I repeat the process and improve. As a white belt who wants to see other white belts stick with the lifestyle, I think it's important to get them over that awkward hump to the point where they are understanding and having some fun. After all, white belt is where most people quit. Okay, so now let's get back to using verbal cues, visualization, and kinesthetic examples. Verbal cues. Verbal cues are exactly what they sound like. You say something, it means something. In dance, you might say step, shuffle, ball, change, flat. If you're a tap dancer, that will mean something to you. Dance relies heavily on these verbal cues. They have names for moves, steps, and descriptions for the emotions you are to convey. Verbal cues also include the way you say the cue. If you yell it, it means something different than if you whisper it. Structured dance, like ballet, has names for everything, so it's easy to use verbal cues to string together movements using a combination of explicit and implicit memory. Contemporary dance is more unstructured. Jiu Jitsu is more unstructured, but still there are well-known terms like open stance, closed stance, mount, base, side control, and so on. In fact, if we were so bold as to name more positions, we would probably learn and teach more easily. Our newly minted black belt, David Brown, has colorful names for certain positions that when he calls them out are easy to remember. His verbal cues have been used to create pathways in the gray matter that lives between even my ears. When my daughter was little, she would be on stage at a recital and you could hear each one of the kids saying every move as they did them. The teachers had trained them so well that we would hear kids singingly chanting, 1, 2, hands up high, turn halfway, hop, and so on. When dancers structure their movements like this, it is easier to encode and retrieve them. For this to work in Jiu Jitsu, we probably have to start with a common language. Open stance, closed stance, choking arm, choking leg, cross grip, same side grip. Standardizing on terminology can help people memorize the verbal processes. It takes time to teach this way, but once you have embedded those verbal cues and you take your students through the motor skills, when they are not on a mat or in a dance studio, they can more readily repeat the cues and visualize the movements. These verbal cues can also be written down and trigger the motor movements later. Visual cues. Walton also suggests that in order to successfully learn, memorize, and execute dance movements, one must be able to picture it being done by others, or preferably by the self, and then replicate it. Without this ability to visualize and remember, a dancer would need a demonstrator constantly in front of him, showing them the steps until muscle memory or some other memory system took over. Others refer to these cues as creating a movie in their minds. Professional dancers will try to connect the moves to a storyline that is playing in their heads, like they are acting out a scene almost. Perhaps chains of movements like you see in some jiu-jitsu flowcharts could help here. When dance instructor Natalie Tessier is teaching her tap and jazz students to pivot, she says for them to imagine they're stepping forward to squash a bug. She even makes them say squash when they put their weight on the ball of their foot. Recording your drilling and rolling sessions can be extremely valuable. Dancers do this all the time. They routinely video themselves doing a routine and then watch it and practice to the video itself. Not only does it show what you're doing, it shows what you're not doing that you think you're doing. I was trying to lock a triangle on multiple people and was struggling, so I asked David Brown for help. He said I had to move my hips, so I did. Or I thought I did. The massive move I thought I was making wasn't so massive. He pulled my body over to where it was supposed to be, and then I realized how far away I really was. That was a huge visual cue. I needed to try to be perpendicular. Now that I've seen myself on video and I've associated perpendicular to the finish of the triangle, I can at least rep the move in my head. Kinesthetic cues. Howard Gardner, in his book Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences, defines kinesthetic intelligence as the ability to control one's bodily motions and to manipulate objects skillfully. It's simply the ability to see and do. For students who are good at kinesthetic learning, they can often see something and acquire the moves very quickly. In dance, you combine musicality and body awareness. You feel the tempo and the beat of the sequence. You work on retaining basic movement patterns and concepts through repeated practice, and then you perform the concepts with varying dynamics to a broad range of music. In Jiu Jitsu, you would work on basic drilling and then explore the boundaries of those techniques through rolling. When you have done the basic movements enough that you have created strong pathways in your noggin, your body can access them at will. This is what is often called muscle memory. Professional jazz and contemporary dancer Fei Rao says that when doing choreography, the dancer should think about linking each step of the movements like beads on a necklace. Everything should logically flow together based on where your body needs to be at any given time. Dancer Tapper Lawson says she looks to the rhythm for memory points or landmarks along the way. Landmarks are a great idea for learning moves and positions in jiu-jitsu as well. David Brown uses landmarks often when he teaches. Put your head in the hole has been offered at least once or twice. Look at your wristwatch or answer the phone have been used by Austin Feldman. Now, memorizing a movement or movements in a studio where no one is trying to choke you or submit you is one thing, but when rolling it is a different story. I remember a time last week when I was rolling with a purple belt, I had been studying mount escapes on video, and I thought I had some approaches to escape. When he mounted me, I couldn't think of a single thing to do. And that's what stress will do to you. This is where drilling really comes into play. You have to build the muscle memory. 2 weeks ago, I spent an hour drilling an over-under pass with a teammate. We did the left, we did the right, we even added moves to the beginning and to the end. A couple days later, when rolling, I did something new. I used the over-under pass correctly. Now, one key thing a student has to do is to be present when you're trying to learn something. You have to actively listen. You need to encode that information. Letting your mind wander or losing focus is a surefire way to miss out on an opportunity to learn. After all, you made it to the class, you might as well put in the extra 5% effort to make the lesson stick. Brian Tracy, in his book Accelerated Learning Techniques, says that studies have been shown that people learn faster and retain more when they are in a relaxed state. And relaxed states are impossible to achieve without feeling somewhat comfortable or secure. A student feels more relaxed when the teacher is using a teaching approach that suits that particular student. The more pathways you can use to teach, the better. If you can use experiences the particular student already has, that is helpful as well. Instructors need to think about these things when making a plan if they want to be the best teachers they can be. Everyone learns differently, so by including all three modes, you're most likely to get across your whole student population. I'm afraid that people who have been training for a while don't understand how quickly new movements leave the mind of a beginner. If you don't give them some anchor points, there's no way they can do some of the techniques that are proven to help, like visualization, solo movements, and drilling with other inexperienced practitioners. Austin Feldman, who has been working with me, is excellent at using all three modes. He's got some excellent verbal, visual, and kinesthetic cues that he uses to describe movements. I want to leave you with an example of two approaches of explaining the simple movement of the seatbelt grip. With the seatbelt, it is important to put the correct hand on top. Which version do you remember? You do a seatbelt like this, or like this. Now, that's how I was explained at first, and I would find myself rolling and having to think, okay, if I do it this way and they attack my arm, I won't be able to choke them. But then Austin offered me this gem. You stab the heart, and then you hide the evidence. That's it for this week. For those of you who made it all the way through, congrats, and thanks for watching. I have lots more content planned. If you have any thoughts about how you learn, tips you can give to other instructors, or anything else, please throw them in the comments. Also, subscribe and click the little bell icon to be notified when new content is published. If you're feeling particularly gracious, shoot me a like or a thumbs up. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.